Joining me in the studio now, political commentator Michael Crick. Thank you, Michael. And down the line is Labour MP Margaret Hodge. Why don't we speak to Margaret Hodge first? Thank you so much for joining me, Margaret. Good to have you on the programme. But what a kind of salutary reminder of what a dangerous job being a member of parliament can turn out to be. And my goodness, this was kind of the exact opposite of a recruitment poster, wasn't it? It was really, I think, a kind of stark and dire warning saying, my God, you know, if you think of a political career, you might literally be taking your life in your hands.
Yeah, it's deeply depressing, Vanessa, and awful, but not surprising, if I can say so. I mean, I've been in politics a long, long time, and I had my very, very first death threat when I was on a local authority in 1976. So it's something that comes with the territory. And we've got to understand that we are elected, we're elected politicians, and we need to be accountable. But the people to whom we want to be accountable have to also be civilized. I think about my journey on abuse down the years, and I had that death threat in 76. I fought the British National Party in 2010, and that was pretty horrendous, that battle with them. But there was no social media, so it was sort of, we got horrible emails, letters, phone calls, those sort of things. But it's since the advent of social media that it's really become so sort of overwhelming, and it really fills your life, and it's pretty abusive, and it's mostly anonymous, and it's horrible. It's horrible. But it shouldn't put people off politics.
Well, you say it shouldn't put people off politics. I mean, I've got the list here of attacks and fatal attacks on politicians. Tory MP David Amess tragically stabbed to death at a constituency surgery in Essex. Joe Cox, Labour MP Joe Cox, shot and stabbed in a constituency in Batley-on-Spen by a far-right supporter on June the 16th, 2016. In May 2010, MP Stephen Timms in East Ham was stabbed twice in the abdomen by an Islamist extremist who claimed she wanted to get revenge for the people of Iraq. He suffered serious injuries. He felt he was extremely fortunate not to have been killed. Nigel Jones, MP for Cheltenham, severely injured in January 2000 when he was attacked in his offices by a man with a sword. And Andrew Pennington, a Gloucestershire County councillor, killed in the same attack while trying to defend the then MP. So when you say, Dame Margaret Hodge, this really shouldn't put people off, you kind of can't help thinking anybody with any sense might think twice or thrice or longer before taking up such a career.
Indeed. And I mean, but the way forward is not to say don't come into politics. The way forward is to try and make politics a safer territory. And I mean, I think there are a number of things I would say about that. That a lot of the abuse comes from the platforms, the online platforms. And we did have the opportunity with the Online Harms Act, as it is now, to look at abuse of adults. And the government chose not to do that because they said they wanted to defend freedom of speech. I want to defend freedom of speech, but I also want to defend that in a safe space. So I think the platforms have got to do much more to pull down this abusive stuff more quickly, change their algorithms so they don't encourage it. And the other thing, which I just can't get my head around, Vanessa, I can't understand why we should protect anonymity online. If people, if you got rid of the anonymity, and that you can always make exceptions for people like the victims of domestic violence, those who need to remain anonymous. But everybody else, if you got rid of anonymity, I think you would have cut that down. Now, whether that would have helped in this particular instance, I don't know. But I think cutting down the abuse starts changing the environment and the temperature and the culture in which we have to operate. But, politics is too important in our lives. The decisions that we take, whether, in government and as politicians, matter to everybody. So we've got to do what we can to promote and protect that, not to run away from it.
I mean, I know we invoke the word education at every opportunity. That's not if we're saying we need more money, which is the other thing we say about every subject we cover on this programme, regardless of what it is. But if we say education in this instance, do we believe that the people who physically attack and would harm members of parliament think that these individual human beings are responsible solely and as individuals for implementing hostile policies that they disagree with? I mean, how can they think that government policy is crafted and engineered by one actual person that they're now looking at or stabbing or trying to kill? Is it because nobody has explained to them what MPs actually do and actually how most are cogs in a wheel and pretty powerless on their own? Or is it because they see MPs as kind of agents of the government and therefore it doesn't really matter which one you kill, you just want to wipe one out at least and at random? Is that what that is?
I mean, at the moment, politicians are not held in very high regard at all as a result of all the, people see us as less trustworthy even than Russian kleptocrats in a poll that came out yesterday. So there is that thing that, we've got to rebuild the trust in politics. It's a different agenda, it's a different conversation, but I think that is really important. And then I think a lot of this is lashing out. And if if you're in the public domain in any way, I mean, whether you're a politician or whether you're a footballer or whether you appear on television, whatever you do, you then become an easy name to lash out against. I don't know, I haven't got all the answers. I mean, I've had to, since we've had the Israel-Gaza conflict, I've had to increase my personal protection. I now have plainclothes police officers with me when I do events in the borough, because I'm determined to carry on being accessible to my constituents. But and I don't like that. I don't like having to have that, but that's the advice I get, and of course I stick to that advice. So it's a bit about education. I think it's a bit about what we do in relation to the online platforms, and I do think it's also the police being sensible. I got an enormous amount of abuse when I was fighting anti-Semitism within my own party, the Labour Party. And at that time, I did always feel that even when I reported it to the police, they didn't take it very seriously. I think now with the Israel-Gaza a conflict, which has become so sort of polarized here in the UK. And I know that my Muslim women MP colleagues are receiving as much more abuse, some of them, than I am. And I think the police are being much better at reacting and taking the threats that we're getting seriously.
Let me bring Michael Crick into this. Michael, you decided in the end a career as a Member of Parliament was not for you. Do you think that it is obviously vitally important in a democracy to work within government or to oppose government, to bring about all the things that we need to happen so that we have healthcare and roads and libraries and all the stuff that we need? But do you think that if you're actually fearing for your life or your continued health, it's not worth it?
A lot of people will be making that decision, and it's very sad. And it does have serious implications in that we need the best people in Parliament. Too many of the best people are going to the city and making zillions. And we need the best brains, the best and the brightest at Westminster and in government and being members of Parliament and in the civil service. And every time there is an attack like this is yet another reason not to go into Parliament. There are quite a lot of others. Yes. I mean, I think MPs are underpaid, personally.
Yes.
Labour are proposing to ban MPs from having second jobs. So that means that they will leave Parliament earlier, having been a minister, say, rather than stick around and give us the benefit of their wisdom. And the demands on them are greater in the constituency. They're expected to live in the constituency, also to live in their London. What are they going to do with their family? So there are so many reasons why people aren't going into politics. And then you've got the problems Margaret touched on it, that it makes ordinary political discourse with the voters so much more difficult. MP surgeries now, in the old days, you could just turn up to the MP surgery, it'd be advertised in the library or in the post office, and you could just turn up and talk to the MP, join the queue and talk to him or her about whatever problem it was you had. Now you have to book it in advance. MPs are accompanied now by security, and so they're less likely to have proper interaction with the voters. They'll think twice about going out and walking down the high street in certain circumstances. And it's only by doing that and holding surgeries where people can turn up spontaneously, all of those normal processes of being a politician, that you really understand what the voters' concerns are.
Ultimately, why did you decide against it?
I decided journalism was more fun. And
you might be right. You might well be right. We'll have to ask.
There are a number of factors. I sometimes think, well, maybe I should have gone into politics. And I suspect I would have just simply have been a troublemaking backbencher, found it very frustrating. But, many of my contemporaries became ministers. Some of them well, one of them, Prime Minister. And I do sometimes wonder, but too late now, I think.
And Dame Margaret Hodge, you know, you said it would be appalling if our best brains were lost to politics. Obviously, we need those people working for us who are wise and informed and innovative, visionary, the kind of people that industry would adore, but we need them to work for us instead. So do you feel that Mike Freer, giving this very frank, very honest and completely understandable précis of why he doesn't want to do it anymore, and when you read it, you think, my God, of course he doesn't want to do it. It's not fair on his husband. He's now wearing a bulletproof vest. You know, he's had so many near brushes with death. It's really very frightening. He realised it's just taking far too much of a toll. And also when you hear MPs like Stella Creasy talk about the abysmal and revolting, you know, misogynistic trolling that they have to suffer on a daily basis just simply for being female and MPs. I mean, it really is unthinkable, and yet they're putting up with it on a daily basis. When you say what you yourself have been through and going to continue to go through, I mean, you could see, can't you, why it's going to be harder and harder to get anybody of any calibre to volunteer.
Yeah, I mean, we all face, you know, I go back to my starting point on it, Vanessa. We're elected democratically, so we have to find a way in which we can be accountable. You know, you put yourself up there, so you have to hold yourself to account. You have to be there to be held to account by your constituents, by, you know, the media, by everybody. And that goes with the job, which is why I go back to my first death threat was actually in 1976. So it's not a sort of new phenomenon. It's got worse because of social media. But what I'd say to you is, I'm coming to the end of my career now, is you know, of course you have your ups and downs and terrible moments, and I'm so empathetic to Mike Freer. You know, what he's been through is intolerable.
Yes.
But what I've been able to do in politics, I do feel incredibly privileged. You know, I've been able to tackle issues that I could never tackled in another job. You know, what I'd say to Michael Crick is the problem with being a journalist is you're a bit of a voyeur on what we do, whereas we are the ones who actually can do the actions and do the things that make a difference to people in our communities. So I feel I've had a privileged life. I think this threat and you know, what's happened today is just awful. I think the threat is a negative. But for me, the positives of, you know, the people I've met, the things I've done, all that outweighs the dangers. And, you know, we've got to work towards making it a safe place, because it's a really important place.
Dame Margaret Hodge, Michael Crick, thank you very much indeed.